The kingdom of Agatha was ruled under King Argon I. He brought unity under one banner, the blue and gold. He was the first to unite the entire Agathian continent under one rule, conquering and crushing all opposing factions until the few nobles who stood against him were forced into submission. He was truly a mighty king, though his quest for glory didn't end at this feat. He wanted more, and he grew restless. A mere 6 months after uniting the land under Agathian rule, he wished to expand his empire's borders even more. But alas, this would be his downfall. Before long, the armies under Argon were called upon once more. This time, all under one banner and against a common enemy, Tenosia. This strange land to the south held many mysteries. Its people were odd and seemed to lack any kind of formal rule, unlike the Agathians. Little was known of their military capabilities, but Argon was supremely confident that the battle-hardened warriors would decimate any minor resistance the ill-disciplined Tenosians could summon. To rally support from the nobles for the war, he declared a crusade against the Tenosian capital of Jahardon. Some questioned the need for war again so soon after uniting the lands, but no one had the nerve to stand up to Argon so early in his reign. Most were also certain it would be a crushing victory. Soon after, Argon and his many battalions arrived on the northern shores of Tenosia to discover that news of the crusade had spread far and wide. Far enough to inform the Tenosians, who had prepared a full-fledged defense and were camped not far from the northern shore. Soon Argon realized that the lands of Tenosia had a much more formal rule and strength than he anticipated. However, he had just declared a crusade. It was his first major act as king. If he turned back now, it would be a sign of weakness, one he simply couldn't afford so early in his reign. His wisest and most trusted military advisor, Malric Terowin, tried his best to convince King Argon to turn back, but he ignored him, ordering a full-on assault at daybreak. As the sun crept up from the horizon, the Agathians, weary from their travels, held little in terms of their usual splendor. Most of the men had hoped to be sent home for leave after the unification ceremony, and held a bitter taste in their mouth for leaving for war again so soon. But with the army assembled and the Tenosians in sight, Argon gave his battle speech. It was legendary, and he poured fire into the souls of the Agatha Knights. He ended it with a valiant battle cry to charge forward, and his men hurtled toward the enemy. They slammed into the poorly equipped Tenosians, sending them sprawling through the air. The charge was glorious, but soon, the harsh Tenosian climate began to take its toll on the warriors. The men, burdened by their heavy armor, grew weary quite quickly under the blazing sun, and the tide of battle began to change. But Argon refused to surrender or order a retreat. Instead, he plunged himself deep behind the enemy lines in an effort to spur the faltering spirits of his army. It was there, surrounded by Tenosian forces, that the mighty Alfonso Argon III met his demise. When the king's banner fell, the Agathian army crumbled, and those who had any energy left fled for their lives back to the encampment on the shore. Malric rounded up what troops who sought leadership and brought them back to the Agathian continent, but the few soldiers who couldn't believe their king had fallen stayed behind, thinking that he was simply taken prisoner by the enemy. Phaedrud Kern, a well-renowned warrior, led these troops. And by the time that Phaedrud and the remaining Agathian knights learned of the king's death, they set sail for their homeland. But they weren't welcomed back with open arms. Malric had betrayed what was left of the Agathian army, deeming them traitors and failed crusaders. They were spat at and jeered by the local population of the first town they arrived in. Upon finally learning of Malric's betrayal, Phaedrud called upon King Argon, the nephew of the fallen king and the true heir to the throne, to offer up support of the Agathian Knights. For he didn't want the sacrifices of King Argon I to be wasted away by the devious Malric Terowin. The nobles who supported Phaedrud and Dainum formed together with their troops to hold up the name of the Agatha Knights and take back the throne that was rightfully theirs. It was a civil war once more, and And on the Battle of Stone's Hill, the Steward King Phaedrud Kern was slain by the Masons. For 20 years after this, the Mason Order held rule over the land, pillaging and taking as they pleased. But as the recent winter sets in, the whispers and rumors of a new leader are spread around as King Argon II and the united noble houses bring forth the Agatha Knights to push back against the Mason Order. But the grizzled old King Malric welcomes the battles to come with the full might of the Mason army. And once more, legendary warriors will be born into this battle to rule Agathia.